Welcome back to Into the Paradox, everyone. Today we're ripping the lid off some of the most persistent and unsettling questions of our time. We're talking about power, control, and the hidden hands that might just be shaping our world. Is the battle between nationalism and globalism merely a smokescreen? A grand game played by the elites? And are corporations, the new monarchies, pulling the strings of a shadow government? Heavy stuff, I know. I'm joined by our incredible panel, David, the conspiracy author, Anastasia, our brilliant historian and researcher, and Tom, the occult and crime specialist. David, let's start with you. You've written extensively on the idea of a shadow government. What's your take on this game for the elites?
Peter, it's not just a take, it's a reality. The game isn't new, it's just evolved. Look, nationalism versus globalism is the perfect distraction. While we're all arguing about borders and trade deals, the real power players, these transnational corporations and their facilitators within various secret societies, they're consolidating power. They don't care about your flag. They care about market share and control over resources. It's a binary choice presented to the public, designed to keep us squabbling while they move the goalposts.
I understand the sentiment, David, and certainly the tension between national interest and global interconnectedness is palpable today. But to frame it purely as a distraction by elites risks oversimplifying centuries of complex political and economic evolution. Nationalism as a concept gained traction after the Westphalian system defining sovereign states. Globalism, in its modern economic sense, really picked up post-WWII with institutions like the IMF and World Bank. These weren't necessarily created by a cabal, but emerged from a desire for stability and growth after immense conflict.
Anastasia makes a good point about history. But history is often written by the victors, or more accurately, by those who fund the historians. When we talk about these institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, or even older structures, we have to ask, who initiated them? Who sits on their boards? Who benefits the most? And when you dig into the origins of many influential families, many of them were deeply involved in, shall we say, less transparent organisations. The lines between finance, politics, and certain brotherhoods have always been blurred. Power doesn't just manifest, it's cultivated. Often in the dark.
Cultivated in the dark? That's a chilling thought, Tom. David, you're nodding vigorously. What's the link here for you? Are these corporations, as Tom implies, extensions of these older brotherhoods or secret societies?
Absolutely, Peter. It's not a direct X marks the spot kind of link, but the ethos is identical. These groups historically have always sought to centralize power and knowledge. Think of the East India Company, a corporation that practically ran an empire. They had their own army, their own laws. Fast forward and you see multinational corporations with budgets larger than many nations, influencing policy, shaping culture, controlling supply chains. The difference now is they've just shed the overt military uniform. The corporate boardroom is the new throne room, and the royalty are the CEOs and the globalist financiers, many of whom share common ideological roots, often stemming from these very secret societies Tom mentioned. They're not just playing the game, but they are the game.
While it's true that corporations hold immense power today, comparing them directly to historical monarchies or even the East India Company might be a bit anachronistic. Monarchies held sovereignty, they were the state. Corporations, even the most powerful ones, still operate within legal frameworks set by states, however imperfectly enforced. The East India Company was granted quasi-sovereign powers by the British Crown, it didn't usurp it. Today's corporate power is more subtle. It's about lobbying, market influence, technological dominance. It's a different beast, albeit one that definitely warrants scrutiny.
And isn't that subtlety part of the genius? If you replace the monarchy with a direct corporate rule, there would be rebellion. But if you gradually shift power, if you influence policy from the shadows, if you make it seem like individual nations are making their own choices while the corporate giants dictate the economic terms, that's a much more insidious and ultimately effective form of control. Think of the concept of regulatory capture, where industries effectively control the agencies meant to regulate them. That's not just lobbying, that's blurring the lines of governance. And the symbolism often associated with these powerful corporate entities, if you look closely, often mirrors some of the symbolism from much older, more enigmatic groups.
Tom, you're touching on something fascinating there. The idea that this power shift isn't an overt coup, but a slow, almost imperceptible seep into the established order. Anastasia, from a historical perspective, have we seen this kind of power seep before, where one dominant structure gradually yields its influence to another, without necessarily a violent overthrow?
Oh, absolutely, Peter. The decline of the Roman Empire wasn't a single event, but a long, drawn-out process of decentralization, economic shifts, and the rise of new power centers. Feudalism itself was a system where land ownership rather than state apparatus dictated power, and local lords often wielded more immediate control than a distant monarch. The transition from absolute monarchies to constitutional monarchies, or republics, also involved gradual shifts, often driven by economic changes and the rise of a mercantile class. So the idea of power evolving and shifting hands isn't new. What is new, perhaps, is the scale and the transnational nature of today's corporate influence.
Exactly, Anastasia. And that transnational nature is key. Because if you have loyalties to a nation, you might still feel some accountability to its people. But if your loyalty is to a globalist agenda, to profit margins that span continents, to shareholders who don't care about a local community in, say, Ohio or France, then where's the accountability? The nation state is becoming obsolete in the eyes of these corporate titans. They see it as an impediment. And what better way to dismantle impediments than to create a system where we're all fighting amongst ourselves, distracted by culture wars and identity politics, while they quietly redraw the global map of resources and influence.
And this isn't just about economics, it's about ideology. Many of these secret societies, throughout history, have held what we might call utopian or transformative visions for humanity. Visions of a new world order aren't just modern conspiracy fodder, they echo ancient philosophical and occult aspirations. A one-world government, a unified humanity but under their guidance. Corporations become the vehicles, and globalism becomes the framework to achieve this under the guise of progress and efficiency. The elites aren't just rich people, they're often people with a shared vision, passed down through generations, often codified in esoteric traditions.
So, Tom, you're suggesting there's an almost spiritual or ideological underpinning to this push towards globalism, beyond just pure economic gain, that it's not just about money, but about a specific vision for humanity that certain powerful groups are trying to implement?
Precisely, Peter. Money is a tool, a means to an end. The ultimate end for many of these esoteric currents is control, order, and the shaping of human consciousness. Consider the symbolism embedded in architectural structures of international organizations or the logos of powerful corporations. Often, they contain ancient, almost arcane symbols that resonate with these utopian ideals. These aren't just decorative, they're signatures, subtle markers of a worldview that runs much deeper than quarterly reports.
While I agree that symbols hold power and can reflect underlying ideologies, we must be careful not to conflate the use of ancient symbols with the direct, unbroken line of occult influence dictating modern corporate strategy. Many symbols are simply recycled for their aesthetic appeal or their historical gravitas, without necessarily implying a direct cabal connection. The desire for a new world order has also manifested in various forms throughout history, from religious movements to political ideologies, not solely from secret societies. The challenge is to differentiate between genuine influence and pattern recognition that might be, shall we say, overzealous.
Anastasia, with all due respect, sometimes the patterns are just there. It's not overzealous, it's connecting the dots that they've deliberately left for those who know how to look. The New World Order isn't just a catchy phrase, it's a stated goal by prominent figures throughout the 20th century. George H.W. Bush spoke of it explicitly. And when you see global initiatives that funnel power away from individual nations towards unelected bodies or to highly influential NGOs funded by these very corporate giants, you have to ask, who benefits? Who set the agenda? It's not always a single room of shadowy figures, but a convergence of interests, shared philosophies, and often shared memberships in exclusive clubs and societies that cultivate these very ideas.
So is it fair to say then that the elites aren't necessarily some monolithic cloaked cabal, but rather a network of incredibly wealthy, influential individuals and organizations who share a similar globalist vision, and that secret societies might serve as a sort of ideological incubator or networking platform for some of them?
That's a much more nuanced way to put it, Peter. But yes, that's essentially it. It's not necessarily a guy stroking a white cat in a volcano lair. It's subtler, more insidious. It's a network effect where shared values, often rooted in the pursuit of power and a desire to manage humanity, drive decisions that appear disparate but ultimately coalesce into a coherent global agenda. And when you look at how central banks operate, how global financial crises are managed, how pandemics are handled, how technology is deployed for surveillance, you start seeing the common thread, the same playbook being used over and over.
I think it's crucial to acknowledge that power naturally coalesces. Wealthy individuals, by virtue of their resources, will always have more influence. And certainly, shared social circles and exclusive clubs have historically served as networking grounds for the powerful. This isn't inherently conspiratorial, but rather a feature of human social organization. However, the step from influential network to shadow government secretly controlling the world is a large one, and requires concrete, verifiable evidence. The challenge is often distinguishing between influence, which is undeniable, and direct, coordinated, secretive control, which is much harder to prove.
But isn't the point that the evidence is there if you look beyond the surface? The very nature of a secret society means its control won't be broadcast on the nightly news. You have to look at the patterns, the symbology, the consistent narratives pushed by seemingly disparate institutions. Why do certain ideas suddenly become mainstream, propagated simultaneously across media, academic and political spheres? Is it organic or is it a coordinated effort? When you see the same think tanks advising governments globally, often funded by the same corporate interests, it starts to look less like coincidence and more like design. The occult literally means hidden. This isn't about magic spells, it's about hidden power structures.
So the game for the elites, then, could be described as an ongoing, multifaceted strategy where the tension between nationalism and globalism is one of the many levers being pulled. David, from your perspective, what's the ultimate goal of this game?
The ultimate goal, Peter, is total control. It's about a highly centralized, technocratic global governance where individual sovereignty, both national and personal, is eroded. They want to manage every aspect of our lives, from what we eat to how we think to how we transact. Digital currencies, vaccine passports, smart cities, these are all pieces of the puzzle designed to create a surveillance society where dissent is impossible and compliance is mandatory. They believe they know best how to run the world, and they're systematically dismantling any structures that get in their way, including the nation state.
While the idea of a technocratic future can certainly be dystopian if unchecked, many of these developments, digital currencies, smart cities, are also driven by technological innovation and a desire for efficiency, convenience, and solving complex global problems like climate change or poverty. The intention isn't always malevolent control. It's often a genuine belief in finding better solutions. The challenge then is not to reject progress outright, but to ensure that these advancements are deployed ethically, with transparency, and with democratic oversight. The risk is that if we label every forward step as part of a cabal's plan, we might throw out beneficial changes along with the genuinely concerning ones.
Anastasia, who defines ethical? Who ensures transparency when the decision makers operate outside traditional democratic checks and balances? The language of progress and efficiency has always been used to justify power grabs. What we perceive as better solutions might be excellent solutions for a small fraction of the population, while creating systemic disadvantages for the rest. This isn't about rejecting innovation, it's about asking who benefits most and at whose expense. And often, the answers lead back to those powerful, interconnected networks that David and I are talking about.
It's a tough balance, isn't it, between seeing genuine progress and identifying potential avenues for control. So if we accept for a moment the premise that there's a significant element of a game for the elites here, what can ordinary people do? Are we just pawns, or is there a way to influence the board?
Awareness, Peter, is the first step. People need to wake up, to question the narratives, to understand that the mainstream media is often complicit or controlled. Educate yourself. Research independently, support local economies, decentralize where possible. Don't fall for the divide and conquer tactics of nationalism versus globalism. Find common ground with your fellow citizens, regardless of their political leanings, because ultimately we're all being played. Demand transparency from your governments, but also from the corporations that influence them. And never underestimate the power of informed, unified individuals. That's what they fear most.
I wholeheartedly agree with David on the importance of critical thinking and questioning narratives. That's fundamental to any healthy democracy. From a historical perspective, change often comes from grassroots movements, collective action, and holding institutions accountable. It's about active citizenship, voting, engaging in local politics, advocating for policies that promote equity and transparency. Understanding the historical context of power shifts can empower us to recognize patterns and avoid repeating past mistakes. The power of the people, when unified and well-informed, has always been a force to be reckoned with, even against entrenched elites.
And remember, these power structures thrive on our apathy and our belief that we are powerless. When you understand the symbolic language, when you see the hidden influences, you break their spell. Knowledge is power, yes, but applied knowledge is liberation. Look into the esoteric traditions they borrow from, understand their worldview to better dismantle it, support investigative journalism, challenge the consensus. Don't just consume information, analyze it, dissect it, because if you don't define the reality, someone else will define it for you, and that's precisely what this game is all about.
Wow, that's a lot to chew on, but also incredibly empowering. It sounds like the antidote to a shadow government or the influence of a global elite is simply an awakened, informed populace. We've delved into everything today, from the historical roots of power shifts to the modern-day corporate empires and the subtle, sometimes occult influences that might be shaping our world. Whether you believe in a secret cabal or simply a convergence of powerful interests, it's clear that vigilance, critical thinking, and collective action are more important than ever. Thank you, David, Anastasia, and Tom, for an absolutely mind-bending conversation. And thank you all for joining us on Into the Paradox. Keep questioning, keep digging, and we'll see you next time.